What's up guys, this is Arthur for BluffTheSpot. Have you ever wondered what is keeping you from moving up from the micros? On today's video, I'll be doing a new format of hand history review, where we'll be reviewing some hands I played on the last 2 weeks of streaming. If you want to see more content like this, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to this channel, so you always stay up to date in today's fast-paced poker world. Alright guys, so let's jump into this first hand here. Today we'll be again reviewing some hands that we've been putting some aggression post-flop, and we can take down a lot of hands and improve our red line, improve our overall aggression, and make some money on smaller pots and be aggressive overall to improve our win rate in general for micros and low stakes players. So I'll be talking a lot about a few plays that people are not doing enough at micros and low stakes that are very valuable for improving this aggression, and hopefully we can learn something today even. So there's going to be some interesting hands. Let's take a look at this 7-6 hand here. At first instance, button opens, he's an unknown, probably a regular. These hands are played on Party Poker 50 fast forward on last week's strings. And we decided to 3-bet this hand. He made it quite a small open size. We can go around 9.5 to 10 big blinds here is my preference. I definitely want to go bigger, make his life tougher to play in position, not make his life easier. When we 3-bet small here, it's just going to be very easy for him to call a lot of hands and play in position against us. So we want to have a little bit more fold equity. So I like my sizing, I like the combo selection, and we'll be doing that most of the times with this hand. And we face a 4-bet. The size of the 4-bet is a little bit too large, but in a sense of hands that we want to be calling a 4-bet with, this hand fits very well into our call 4-bet range, due to the fact that it's still suited connector, so we can flop a lot of good draws and be able to fight back. And another factor is that I would probably prefer to call a hand like this than calling a hand like 9-10 suited. That is way more often dominated by his bluffing range, which is going to be hands like King 10 offsuit or Ace 10 offsuit. So I like to go for a call here, unless my opponent goes for something like 26 here. Then I'll be finding folds with some hands like this. But overall, if he doesn't tends too far from a standard sizing for 4-betting, I will be clicking call here very often with this specific hands. In this case, as I said, he goes a little bit larger, but I like the fact that we went for a call here with this particular combo. At micro stakes, very often you're also going to see either a big 4-bet, which I already said we can exploit by overfolding and jamming, but they're also very tight, and they're often not 4-betting enough from those positions even though it's like one of the widest position here for us to 4-bet and to fight back. We still see that people are under 4-betting at micro stakes. So oftentimes you're going to see yourself in a situation where your opponent is 4-betting something like 6% here overall, or 6% from these positions. You might want to just go ahead and fold and don't even bother about those hands, because you're probably not going to make money even if you know how to play post flop, because his range is so tight. I do think my opponent here was capable of 4-bet bluffing, so yeah, let's go ahead and call. Alright, so we see a flop where we have a 3 of clubs, 5 of hearts, 9 of hearts. We're gonna have here a good old double gutter, so a lot of equity, and I also think if he has a normal 4-bet range, he's gonna have a lot of air with his bluffs, with hands like King Jack offsuit or Ace 10 offsuit, potentially even Ace Jack offsuit here. So my first instinct here is that we need a lot of protection if he does bet. Of course, we're not going to start betting ourselves, so let's go for a check. And oftentimes people are going to use these small sizes in 4-bet pots. This usually indicates a whole range continuation bet. That doesn't necessarily mean we should assume that, like we just look at 1/3 bets or 1/4 bets and we can assume that he's range betting, but most often they are. In general and in theory, our whole play here should be to just avoid seeing turns and rivers, because we basically want to, again, protect our hand and our equity against those hands that I just mentioned, King Jack, Ace Jack, Ace 10. And even against strong hands, hands like ace queen, if he even 4-bets those, or ace king suited, ace king offsuit, and imagine himself, my opponent here, with ace king offsuit or ace king of clubs here and betting the flop and facing a jam. What is he supposed to do? A lot of people at micro stakes are gonna fold, and not necessarily it is a fold, even versus a quote unquote tight check jamming range. Therefore, I think people are gonna do so often a lot of mistakes against the check jam here by overfolding hands like ace king, as I said, or even ace 10 or whatever hands that they are supposed to call. And even if they call, which they are supposed to call, this hand is a profitable jam here. So I really like the fact that we went for a jam here, but I want to stress that enough here that is important for you guys also at microstakes to realize that we cannot just call here, because whenever we miss the turn, whenever the turn is not a 4 or an 8, we're not going to be happy with our hand anymore. While on the flop we're quite happy here. We're fighting against a lot of air, we have a lot of fold equity, and we have a lot of equity ourselves. While on the turn, if the turn breaks, we basically lose a shit ton of equity, and there's not much of a big incentive for us to continue anymore. Also, if you take a look at his size now, at his stack size now, he has 62 left, and the pot is going to be at least around 80. So he's going to have less than pot behind on the turn. We're going to have just a double gutter, oftentimes facing a jam, and it's not going to look good. So be careful with those hands, guys. They're not good to call here, but they're amazingly good for jamming. So we went for a jam here, and unfortunately my opponent had a hand we didn't want him to have, which is ace-9 offsuit. But again, just to exemplify, if he's gonna have ace-9 offsuit here, imagine if the flop was an 8 instead of a 9 here, he was just going to be in a lot of trouble. Or if he had ace-10, because if he 4-bets ace-9, it's possible that he 4-bets ace-10 as well, etc. So I like the fact that we check jam the flop here, and I think the biggest lesson for you guys at microstakes here is to pay attention and deny as much equity as we can on the flop. Okay, so another example of an aggressive move to deny a lot of equity from our opponents is the 6-5 suited here on the small blind. We face an open with 3-bet, and we face a 4-bet, and I mean, we don't love life here. I think his range is going to be even tighter from comparing to the other hand against the button, but I think this hand still plays fairly well as a call here. And we'll click call. So I already explained a lot of things from this pre-flop situation, and we get a very similar board now, and we went for just the same play. And the concepts are basically the same. He's going to have so many ace kings here, potentially ace queens. Some people are even going to go wider here with offsuit combos, like hands like king queen offsuit or ace queen offsuit. So then it becomes even better. We decide to jam, he folds, this time we get it down, and look at this, it's a 78 big blind spot, 79, that we just pick up with a amazing bluff, semi-bluff. Okay, just coming back to this aggression topic on this 7-9 of clubs hand, and we face a open from the player 4 here, from the cutoff, a call on the button, and a call on the small blind. I don't remember specifically who were the opponents here. His range is going to be fairly standard cutoff range so far, I assume. So from 22% to 28% in general. This guy is going to be fairly tight calling on the button, but people on these stakes are calling quite often on the button. I still haven't figured out if they are wide or tight, but I still like to assume that they are fairly tight with calling the button here. So this guy should be very careful with a lot of checks on the flop so far. Player 1 is it could be whatever. He could just see the spot and yeah, I have pot odds and I'll call very often here. And with this hand, I don't think it's worth a squeeze, and we'll be very dominated by their calling range. Very often we're going to play a very big multi-way pot in which I'll be not comfortable getting it in with a 9 high flush draw or something like this. So I go for the call, which I like. And this board is very nice to be played, especially multi-way, because I feel like when there's a better and a caller, we can apply so much pressure by check raising with hands like this, with so much dead money in the pot. So let's see what happens. Player 4 decides to bet for half pot, which is indicating that he potentially doesn't have a very, very strong hand, but he could still be slow playing, let's say hands like kings or ace king. Not specifically a slow play because he's batting. And as I said, his main strategy here should be to check quite often, but not everybody knows that. Not everybody knows that the button is going to have a tight range, and they should supposed to check very often on multi-way boards. And they often bet with strong hands and check with weak hands. So I'll assume he's fairly stronger than normal here, but I still think this combo is a pretty nice check raise in a high frequency on this board. We usually prefer backdoors, straights, and backdoor flush draws to do this with. And we have some nice blockers to some hands that they might fold, they might call, sorry. So yeah, I really like check raising here, especially when he doesn't go for something like 3/4 or pot size here, out of position against 3 opponents. So we go for a slightly larger sizing, which I think potentially makes some sense as he is representing a quote-unquote strong range when he bats multi-way like this. Maybe slightly smaller, but I think this is completely fine actually by me. He clicks call, and my plan for the turn is usually when I pick up equity, I'll continue barreling. So whenever I pick up a flush draw, I somehow turn an open ender or hit the pair or anything like this that I can see some value on continue batting and have some potential to improving on the river or have some potential to have very good bluffs on the river, then I'll keep barreling. So I think the deuce of clubs is basically perfect. There's going to be a lot of hands like queens, jacks, tens, nines, and yeah, and so on, 8x's, 5x's that are potentially folding now to a barrel that I feel very comfortable batting here. As for our batting size, I think we should polarize quite a bit here. The thing is that we don't need to really go crazy because the pot has 42 already and he has 114 left. So I don't think there's much sense into overbatting, but I think we have to put a fairly big amount of bet here if we are going to bet. So something like 30, around 30-ish. It's going to be enough for us to jam rivers for around pot size left. So I would like to go something like 33, 35 even, really representing something pretty strong. So he just click calls, and at this point I think he's going to potentially find folds with hands like queens, jacks, tens, etc. And he's fairly likely to have a lot of king x's, sets, 2 pairs, and not giving up the river. So if he still has queens, jacks, and tens on his range, he's fairly often folding rivers. Although I would think this hand is, yeah, potentially not a great river bluff, but still. The stronger he looks here on the river, the less I'm gonna bluff. But this river is just amazing for us. We just hit the flush, and he has a lot of strong hands in his range. But there is some people that might think that it's probably okay for us to check call here and induce him for a bluff. But we have to think of, first of all, how many bluffs he's gonna have here, because we're already blocking some of his draws, which are gonna be naturally 7-6 hands and 10-8 hands or something like this. Yeah, so I don't think he's gonna be bluffing too often on the river because he's not gonna call check raises on the flop and bet himself into multi-way pots like this with random air that he can turn into a bluff after calling 2 streets. So yeah, I don't think check calling makes too much sense, especially because if he has hands, let's say hands like ace king with the ace of clubs here, he's gonna be quite happy calling a jam on the river, even though the river is not amazing. But he's gonna look at his ace of clubs and say, yeah, now I have pot size left, and then I'm blocking the nut flush, so I'll call down. So we bank the river. I think the best option here is for us to jam. We do jam, he ends up folding. Alright guys, now we're gonna review this king queen suit at the end. We face an open on the small blind, and we're on the big blind. I think this so far is a pretty standard hand. We're gonna 3-bet this suited broadways in general. And this board is a board that player 1 first of all goes for a call. So we're gonna see a 9 of diamonds, 10 of diamonds, deuce of clubs board. And this is a board where people get a lot of doubts on if they should play a mixed strategy. They use a 1/3 size, if they use a half pot size. To be fair, I think you could play in several different strategies. I prefer to go for 1/3 in general here, with my whole range in position against the small blind. Although on these boards that are 10 high and being slightly deeper here, I do like the goal for slightly bigger sizing, in which we actually choose to go. I'm still gonna go with my whole range here, and I think that's very hard to exploit by my out of position player, especially because he has to go high with his check raising ranges, which I don't think it happens at micro stakes or low stakes. So we indeed go for a half pot here, and he calls. The deuce of spades appears on the turn, and he surprisingly to me goes for a 2/3 to 3/4 bet here. I do not like this play. He's trying to, I don't know if he's trying to represent the deuce. I do think he's going to have a lot of draws. If he wants to deny equity or push up equity that he has, he wants to check raise the flop most often. Therefore, I don't see too much sense. Therefore, I don't see too much sense on his play. But I still have a gut shot, 2 overcards, and he's possibly going for a crazy bluff here, which we don't know why. I don't know if I had any big reads on him. At first instant, if I see this turn and he checks to me, I'll be barreling very, very often with a hand like this, because it just has great blockers. It has a great opportunity to improve rivers and check back with some medium strong hands, and has a great opportunity to hit a nut straight. So with that amount of equity, I don't see how can I fold here. But I don't necessarily mind folding against an opponent who never does that, or who is just too tight pre-flop or just too tight overall in his general game. So it's a play that it's a little bit close depending on the opponent, but I think potentially I had reads in game and I went for a call. But keep in mind we're going to be fairly aggressive on this turn card, and we call. And the ace appears on the river and he checks. So what I usually think here is that when people check here, they're often gonna check and give up. And the reason is because I've did some study in the past. When people are double barrel and 3-bet pots and they check the river, they're usually giving up. Very, very often they're giving up. If you jam, they are gonna fold, and the results are basically extreme, like more than 80% of the time. And I did with big samples this study, and I think this could potentially apply here, especially when people do timing tells like snap check or tank a lot and check, like really not liking the river card, not sure what to do now. So I think our blockers are pretty great as well. We're blocking the best 10x's he might have. We're blocking some good ace x's he might have, hands like ace queen. I also don't think he's going to lead too often with hands like ace queen of hearts here on the turn that we're blocking. So we're kind of blocking a good portion of his range. He's gonna have a ton of 10x's and 9x's that he's trying to get protection on the turn that he might fold the river. So as long as I know my opponent is capable of folding hands like 10x's and 9x's here, I'll be jamming king queen. Also, again, if we barrel the turn with a hand like this and this is the river, I'll be jamming fairly often, because my opponent is also supposed to call a lot of pocket pairs on the turn, hands like 6s, 7s, 8s, 4s, 5s, 3s even. So if he's getting to the river with this amount of hands and with this amount of weak combos that are not capable of bluff catching this specific river because it's just so good for my range, I'll be bluffing very often. So I do think it's possible that this opponent is leading the turn with hands like 5s or 6s, as I said, or a lot of 10x's and 9x's. And when he checks the river, I think he's going to be very capped to those hands. It's possible that he calls me down with 10x's here, or even some 9x's, but the rest is just going to fold very easily. So we do decide to go for a jam after he checks, and we take it down. So that's another example of going with the aggression to take down pots post flop. Alright guys, so that's going to be the last hand for this hand review format, and we'll be reviewing this ace 4 of hearts now. So just as a friendly reminder, this is player 1 is going to be the villain here, and he's a fairly aggressive and spewy. So we open ace 4 of hearts here, and he decides to 3-bet. So first of all, this is not a standard call from these positions. I think I'll even 4-bet a good amount of these hands. Not a good amount, but some portion of these hands here. But usually I'll be just folding specifically ace 4 hearts. I could potentially be leveling here a little bit against him, or I could be very comfortable against him because I stacked him before. I don't know what happened in the hand. This is potentially even a mistake, but I end up calling pre-flop. As I say, this is not a standard call, but potentially because of the reads I have on the guy, I called it. And as I said, he's a very aggressive opponent who is not afraid of putting very big bets post flop. This guy is really, really aggressive, and he's not afraid of putting big bets. So with the ace-4 and the backdoor flush draw, I think we'll be calling. There is going to be some raising, and we do have some incentive to raise flops here whenever my opponent is so aggressive. But aggression is expected on the flop from him. The flop is just in the middle of the both ranges, is hitting both of us kind of the same way. So he has a little bit of advantage of overpairs and etc. But I think still hits both pretty well. So I don't necessarily see this huge size going there too often, but I see some sense. It's not actually the worst case scenario to bet big on this board, especially on these positions, being small blind versus MP. If it was small blind versus button, I would like him to see him using a smaller size bet, something like half pot or even a 1/3 would make sense. Yeah, without further ado, usually in positioning 3-bet pots, we're gonna go with call on the flop, and then we can find some raises on the turn or on the river. So we do go for a call, and we find the 3 of hearts on the turn. And as I said, with that in mind, that this guy is so aggressive, I think we'll have to be aggressive at some point. We had to fight aggression with more aggression. And as I said, he's not afraid of putting a lot of money in the pot. And I have a read on this guy specifically that he likes to put a lot of money and he doesn't care of letting close to stack size behind to the river. So as you can see here, he puts 33 on a pot of 52. The pot is already 85 before I put my money in, and he has 40 behind. So the pot is going to be around 110 big blinds, and he's going to have 40 behind, which makes absolutely zero sense. But I have seen this at least more than 5 times from this opponent. I know he does that with a lot of bluffs because I have been jamming when he does that, and he still folds with 40 behind. And it has happened so many times, and I'm very comfortable saying here that I prefer jamming here and just basically denying a lot of equity from overcards that you might be barreling here, or even hands like 8, 9 or 7, 8, that then calling, because calling, let's say the river is a brick and he always gonna jam and we're not sure if we should supposed to call anymore, because it potentially hits some of his pairs or something like this, or some of his overcards. Against this opponent specifically, we want to jam. If it was anything like a normal opponent whose turn bets are not as aggressive as this guy, then I would be mostly calling, especially because other opponents are going to use something like, let's say the pot has 50 here, they are going to bet 1/3 because they're going to be able to jam rivers anyways. So in this case, I prefer to go for a jam, and he ends up folding. Alright guys, that was it for today. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. And also let me know in the comments, what do you think about this new format of hand reviews, and what do you think about the hands I reviewed today. I'll be happy to discuss some poker with you, and thanks a lot for watching. I see you guys later. Bye bye.